April 30th, 1942, 10:15 a.m. Skies over RAF Duxford, England. The roar of the Allison V-1710 engine thunders through the cockpit as Ronald Harker, Rolls-Royce's chief test pilot, pushes the throttle forward. The North American Mustang I slices through the crisp spring air, its sleek fuselage gleaming under the patchy English sun. But as the altimeter climbs past 15,000 feet, the power fades like a dying breath. The supercharger strains, the propeller bites at thinning oxygen, and the speed bleeds away. You can almost feel the frustration building in Harker's gloved hands on the stick. This bird, so fierce down low, is gasping up high, vulnerable to the Luftwaffe's high-flying predators. Down below, the green fields of Cambridgeshire blur into a patchwork quilt, but up here, it's a different war. The Mustang, born from a desperate British order in 1940, was meant to be a savior. North American Aviation's chief designer, Edgar Schmood, had sketched it in record time, 102 days from contract to rollout. The prototype NA-73X took to the skies on October 26, 1940, promising speed and agility that outpaced anything the RAF had. With its laminar flow wings and that long, predatory nose, it looked like a thoroughbred ready to run. But the Allison engine, a reliable workhorse at ground level, choked above 15,000 feet. No two-stage supercharger meant no punch where it mattered most, in the stratosphere where bombers lumbered and fighters dueled for supremacy. Imagine the scenes unfolding across the channel. American B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 liberators, their bellies heavy with bombs, droning toward Nazi heartlands. Escorts like the P-47 Thunderbolt or Spitfire Mk5 could only tag along so far, 200, maybe 300 miles, before their fuel tanks screamed empty. Then the bombers were alone, naked against the swarm. Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt Bf 109s, powered by engines tuned for the heights, dove in like wolves on a herd. Tracers stitched the sky, turrets spat back, but the losses mounted. Daylight raids over Schweinfurt or Regensburg in 1943 would later prove it. Without long-range escorts, the 8th Air Force bled. 60 bombers lost in a single day, crews plummeting into flames or captivity. The Mustang could have changed that, but shackled by its engine, it was relegated to reconnaissance and ground attack, a stallion clipped to trot when it yearned to gallop. Harker levels out at 20,000 feet, the cockpit vibrating with the engine's protest. He's flown Spitfires with their Merlin hearts, engines that purred at altitudes where others faltered. The Merlin 61, with its two-stage supercharger designed by Stanley Hooker, delivered 1,390 horsepower at 23,500 feet, far outstripping the Allison's anemic 1,150. As he banks the Mustang into a turn, feeling its responsive controls, a thought ignites. This airframe, with its low-drag design and 367-gallon fuel capacity, could carry the fight deep into Germany, but not like this, not with this engine holding it back. The war in the air was turning brutal, and the Allies needed a miracle. Little did Harker know as he begins his descent back to Duxford's runway that his next move would unleash one.
The wheels of the Mustang touched down on Duxford's grass runway with a soft thud, kicking up fine English dust that swirls in the prop wash. Ronald Harker kills the engine, the Allison winding down to silence as he pops the canopy. The cockpit is still warm from the climb, but his mind races colder than the wind at altitude. He climbs out, boots hitting the ground hard, and heads straight for the nearest telephone in the flight ops hut. No time for debrief formalities. He dials Ray Dory, head of Rolls-Royce's experimental division, and the words tumble out. This airframe is magnificent. Responsive, fast, clean lines, but it's crippled above 15,000. Put a Merlin 61 in it, the same one that's making the Spitfire Mark IX untouchable, and you'll have the fighter the Luftwaffe can't match. Dory listens, then pauses. The Merlin 61, with Stanley Hooker's two-stage, two-speed supercharger and intercooler, was already stretched thin powering Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Mosquitoes. Production lines hummed day and night just to keep pace with losses. But Harker's enthusiasm is infectious. Within hours, the idea reaches Ernest Hives, Rolls-Royce's managing director. Hives sees the potential immediately. The Mustang's laminar flow wing, low drag, and cavernous fuselage fuel tanks could turn the Merlin's high-altitude power into something revolutionary. Range, speed, altitude, all in one package. By May 13, 1942, Air Ministry and Rolls-Royce representatives sit in a tense conference room. Maps of occupied Europe cover the table, red lines marking the shrinking radius of current escorts. They agree. Convert a Mustang Mark I airframe right here in England. The Merlin 65, a medium-altitude variant, gets the nod first, as the high-altitude 61 is too precious. But the principle is the same. Work begins in June at Hucknall, Rolls-Royce's secret test site. 4 airframes are pulled from the line: AL-963, AL-975, AM-203, AM-208. Technicians swarm them, ripping out the Allison, welding new mounts, rerouting coolant lines, and mating the beastly V-12 to the sleek American nose. It's a daring fusion, British heart in an American body. October 13, 1942. Captain R.T. Shepard, Rolls-Royce chief test pilot, straps into the first converted Mustang X, serial AL-975. The Merlin 65 roars to life with a deeper, throatier growl than the Allison ever managed. He taxis out, the 4-bladed Rotal prop biting the air, and lifts off. The climb is electric. Where the Allison faded, this engine surges, 1,390 horsepower at 23,500 feet, nearly 300 more than its predecessor at height. Shepard pushes it higher, faster. The airspeed indicator climbs to numbers that make hearts race. Over 430 miles per hour at altitude, a leap of nearly 50 miles per hour. The Mustang X isn't just better, it's transformed. From a low-level raider to a high-altitude predator capable of shadowing bombers all the way to Berlin. Word spreads like wildfire across the Atlantic. USAF pilots get their chance in the air, and the reports flood back glowing. North American Aviation, already briefed by Rolls-Royce, scrambles. In July, contracts go out for 2 prototypes in the States, briefly called XP-78, soon XP-51B. Packard, the luxury car maker turned wartime engine builder, licenses the Merlin design and begins cranking out V1650-3s, American-built equivalents of the Merlin 61. But the USAF doesn't wait for proof. In August 1942, months before the first XP-51B even flies, they place an order for 400 Merlin Mustangs. Confidence like that is rare in wartime procurement. Back in England, the Mustang X prototypes keep proving the point. Trials wrap by December, every flight revealing more: better climb, superior maneuverability, and that precious range extended by the airframe's efficiency. The RAF dreams of mass production, but Merlin's supply is already maxed out. No matter, the seed is planted. Across the ocean, North American engineers work feverishly, adjusting the wing position forward to balance the heavier Packard Merlin, carving space for an extra 85-gallon fuselage tank. The impossible fusion is becoming reality. And somewhere in Berlin, Hermann Göring still boasts that no Allied fighter can reach his capital. He has no idea how wrong he is or how soon he'll learn.
December 1st, 1943. Boxted Airfield, Essex, England. Dawn breaks cold and gray over the concrete hardstands as the first Merlin-powered P-51Bs of the 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustangs, taxi out in formation. The Packard V1650 engines, American-built Merlins, growl with authority, their deeper rumble echoing across the frost-kissed grass. Pilots like Major James H. Howard strap in, the birdcage canopy sliding shut, Malcolm hoods offering better visibility than the old Razorback. Drop tanks hang beneath the wings, 75-gallon teardrops that stretch the range to over 1,600 miles round trip. No more turning back at the German border. Today, these fighters will stay with the bombers all the way. The mission is a deep penetration escort. B-17s and B-24s lumbering toward Emden, heavy with bombs for the port facilities. As the formation climbs through layers of cloud, the Mustangs slice upward effortlessly. Where the thunderbolts once huffed and the lightning strained, these new birds breathe easy at 25,000 feet. Speed builds to 400+ miles per hour in level flight. The pilots feel it, the responsiveness, the surge of power when they goose the throttle. One young lieutenant banks gently, watching the needle climb. "This thing climbs like a homesick angel," he mutters over the radio. The Luftwaffe, still licking wounds from Schweinfurt and Regensburg, has no idea what's coming. March 4th, 1944, the first daylight raid on Berlin. Over 800 heavy bombers, a sky black with flak and contrails. The 354th Mustangs, now joined by the 4th Fighter Group at Debden, push east. Flight Officer Chuck Yeager in his P-51B Glamorous Glen peels off from the box at 32,000 feet. He spots a lone Bf-109 drifting too close to the bombers. Yeager dives, guns blazing. 3 of his 6 .50 calibers fire at first, then 2, but it's enough. The 109 erupts in flames, tumbling earthward. The Luftwaffe's interceptors swarm, but the Mustangs meet them head-on. No more short-legged escorts vanishing at the Rhine. The little friends stay glued to the heavies, then chase the Germans down when they break. The impact hits like a shockwave. In the first weeks of 1944, bomber losses plummet. Where raids once cost 5 to 10% of the force, now they drop below sustainable levels for the Luftwaffe. Göring's vaunted fighter force, already bleeding from fuel shortages and pilot attrition, faces a new predator. The Mustang doesn't just escort, it hunts. When the bombers turn for home, the P-51s dive after fleeing Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, strafing airfields, shredding trains, turning the sky into a graveyard. By March, the 8th Air Force fields nearly 175 Mustangs. By spring, 14 of 15 fighter groups convert. The Luftwaffe's Zerstörer twin-engine heavies, once a terror to bombers, become easy meat, pulled from frontline duty entirely. You can almost hear the panic in Berlin. High command briefings turn grim. The once invincible Jagdwaffe bleeds experienced pilots at rates they can't replace. Fuel becomes a ghost, siphoned from training schools, rationed to the bone. And still the Mustangs come, relentless. One after another Luftwaffe aces fall, shot down by these long-nosed invaders that appear from nowhere, outclimb, outrun, outfight. The reversal is brutal. From the arrogance of 1940, when German fighters ruled the skies, to the desperate defense of 1944, where every takeoff risks a Mustang ambush. The air war's turning point isn't a single battle. It's this machine, born from one engineer's bold idea, now multiplied by the thousands. But the story isn't over. As production ramps, Inglewood and Dallas pouring out P-51Bs and Cs, the final evolution arrives.
May 1944. Inglewood, California. Assembly lines at North American Aviation hum around the clock, welding, riveting, painting. The P-51D rolls off the production floor by the hundreds, then thousands. The most obvious change hits you first, that iconic bubble canopy, a crystal-clear plexiglass dome sweeping back in one smooth arc. No more blind spots behind the pilot's head, no more razorback spine blocking the view. A pilot twists in his seat, and the sky opens up 360 degrees. The K-14 gyro gun sight replaces the older reflector, computing lead, range, deflection automatically. 6 .50 caliber Brownings now standard in the wings, 400 rounds each, harmonized to converge at 250 yards. The Packard V165-70 Merlin, tuned for even more power, pushes the Mustang to 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Ceiling climbs to 41,900 feet. With 210-gallon drop tanks, combat radius stretches beyond 1,000 miles. The D model floods the European theater. By midsummer, groups like the 357th Yoxford Boys and the 4th at Debden trade in their B and Cs for the new birds. Chuck Yeager, back in action after his evasion through France, straps into Glamorous Glen III, a gleaming D with the bubble hood. He later calls it the best fighter of the war. The P-51D ruled the sky. On one mission, he downs 5 in a day,
4 FW-190s and an ME-109 with just 660 rounds total. The 6 guns roar like a chainsaw, shredding metal in seconds. No more jamming issues that plagued the early Bs, no more guns firing sporadically, just reliable fury. Over the Reich, the tide turns merciless. German pilots scramble to intercept, only to find Mustangs waiting at altitude, diving from the sun. The Jagdwaffe, already gutted by pilot shortages and fuel rationing, faces the hunter becoming the hunted. Strafing runs become routine. Mustangs swoop low over airfields, cannons blazing, turning parked Focke-Wuffs into burning hulks. Training fields, once safe havens, now burn as P-51s strafe student pilots on the ground. Experienced aces fall faster than replacements arrive. Luftwaffe losses in the first half of 1944 skyrocket, entire Geschwader dissolve. Göring, watching from his opulent headquarters, reportedly mutters that when he saw Mustangs over Berlin, he knew the war was lost in the air. The bombers feel it most. Losses drop dramatically. Raids that once bled 5 to 10% now return with single-digit casualties. The 8th Air Force hammers synthetic oil plants, ball bearing factories, aircraft assembly lines, day after day, unmolested. By late 1944, Allied air superiority is absolute. The Normandy invasion launches under a protective umbrella of Mustangs. Ground support shifts. Mustangs strafe panzer columns, rocket trains, troop concentrations. One pilot recalls buzzing a German column at treetop height, .50s stitching the road until vehicles explode in sequence. The machine that started as a British request, fused with a daring engine swap, now numbers in the thousands. Over 8,000 P-51Ds alone built in 1944 to 45, part of the total 15,000 plus Mustangs. Pilots claim nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat, more than any other USAF fighter in Europe. From one engineer's spark in a Cambridge cockpit to fleets darkening the skies over the fatherland, the P-51 becomes Hitler's worst nightmare realized. The final blows land as the Reich crumbles.
April 17, 1945. Skies over the crumbling Reich. A formation of 1,000 American bombers carves through the thin spring clouds toward the synthetic oil refineries at Leuna and Lutskendorf. Flak bursts bloom like black flowers far below, but the heavy guns are running low on shells. The once terrifying flak towers stand silent, ammunition spent. Above them all, 900 P-51Ds ride shotgun, long-nosed guardians with bubble canopies glinting in the sun. The Luftwaffe scrambles what remains, a handful of battered Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, many flown by boys barely old enough to shave, thrown into the sky on fumes and desperation. Major George Preddy, already the top-scoring Mustang ace with 26.83 aerial victories, leads Blue Flight of the 352nd Fighter Group. He spots the enemy first, 6 109s diving from out of the sun, trying one last desperate bounce. Preddy calls the break. The Mustangs roll inverted, drop tanks jettisoned, and meet the Germans head-on. The air fills with the hammering roar of 50 calibers, tracers crisscross like laser beams. In seconds, 2 109s explode mid-air, pieces tumbling earthward. Preddy rolls onto the tail of a third, the K-14 sight computing the deflection perfectly. A short burst, 3 seconds, and the German fighter disintegrates, pilot bailing out too late. The remaining Luftwaffe aircraft break and flee, but the Mustangs give chase, relentless. By the time the bombers turn for home, the sky is littered with burning wrecks. The 8th Air Force loses only 3 heavies that day, none to fighters. The statistics tell the brutal truth. In the first 3 months of 1945, Luftwaffe fighter losses exceed 2,500 aircraft, most to Allied fighters, with the P-51 claiming the lion's share. German pilot training collapses completely. Replacement pilots receive as little as 20 hours in advanced fighters before combat. Fuel is rationed to the point where many squadrons sit grounded. Meanwhile, Mustang pilots log 30 to 40 hours a month, honing skills that the enemy can no longer match. The hunter has become prey. On the ground, the effect is apocalyptic.
P-51s strafe railways, marshalling yards, troop concentrations, and convoys with devastating accuracy. One group alone, the 357th, claims over 700 locomotives destroyed in the final months. German supply lines choke. Armored columns, once the pride of the Wehrmacht, crawl along cratered roads, easy targets for the low-flying Mustangs. The psychological toll is crushing. German soldiers begin to refer to the P-51 as der Jäger des Jägers, the hunter of hunters. May 8, 1945, VE Day. The Reich lies in ruins. Hermann Göring, captured and awaiting trial, is asked by his Allied interrogators when he knew the war was lost. His answer is immediate: when I saw the first Mustangs over Berlin. The machine that began as a British reconnaissance aircraft, crippled by an inadequate engine, transformed through one engineer's bold vision into the most effective long-range escort fighter of the war. It flew more than 213,000 sorties, destroyed nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat, and helped deliver the knockout blows that broke the Luftwaffe's back. Ronald Harker never sought fame. He returned to Rolls-Royce, continued his test flying, and passed away quietly in 1993. But in the cockpits of those Mustangs, in the memories of the men who flew them, his daring redesign lives on. Chuck Yeager summed it up best: if it hadn't been for the Mustang, the war would have lasted a lot longer. From a cold English morning in 1942 to the final days over a shattered Germany, one engine swap changed the course of history. The sky belonged to the Mustang and the Allies.